I have some familiarity with the congressional political um, situation and machinery that operates through the union and through renegade Hollywood functions. So I realize that when I look at both sides of an issue, like, for example, the Ukraine or Central America, that when I clarify a position that is unpopular and bullied by American media, I do have no reason to presume that the people whose views I'm clarifying would take up with me, nor do I seek for them to take up with me. I'm just a reporter. Now, I do my level best to analyze the situation, and I've seen, to my shock and dismay, how someone like me can and has been used, particularly the aggressive invasion of privacy I suffered as a very young child that continues to the present day in the names of Lenin, Reagan, and Donald Trump. The Democratic Party has more than participated in this, particularly the Clintons and Obamas. They did not take up for Central America's victims of mercenary activity by the United States government. And now they want us all to be stooges of a right wing assembly pushing for participation in the civil war in the Ukraine. Far be it from me to woo the counsel of someone like Putin. The leapfrog oligarchy that has solidified among Henry Kissinger, Putin, Spike Goldie, and Kanye West, Donald Trump, Hollywood powers from Reagan, his alliance with Roger Waters, Robert Fripp, Colin Powell, the NAMIs, Daniel Ellsberg, Noam Chomsky, that have congratulated themselves on getting two sides fixtured against one another to avoid any effrontery from minority opinions that question both. Well, you see why I'm driving at. The blind spot there is always what they are capable of towards ordinary people. We've seen the schizophrenic fort that they keep plunging into our society, as one suspicious figure on Mount Desert Island in the 80s put it. So it's not really my place to tell you what to think or who to think it for, other than I would expect that a person would take counsel of both sides before reaching an opinion, where three sides or four, and always looking for the blind spot where there seems to be something missing, because maybe there is. Now, to get to my point about the civics of Tacoma, Washington, where I live, and Seattle and Pittsburgh, and the West Coast infrareal society, it constantly impinges their views through a sort of seance drama school that knows no self restraint and no boundaries. It's not epic, it's bothersome, and it's harmful. What I think has happened, why it has been so, for example, easy to recruit people from the NAACP who want a pocket full of their own lottery winnings, is that abortion um, comes back to haunt people who grew up in a society that was a mess in the 60s. And it's used to drive people like myself into a corner. And the Christian society tells black people in much the way that D.W. Griffith congratulated the blacks who stood up for the Confederacy. He called them faithful souls. Congratulates um, black people who never been trapped in a situation that they felt necessitated an abortion. And they tell themselves, I'm better than you are. And nobody from the Christian church sticks up for them. And since it served the purposes of the women's lobby to use this sort of thing to silence my testimony about what happened in the 80s, no one stood up for me at all. In fact, they did everything they could to make it worse, dishonorably, knowing that I was in trauma and neuroobedient and looking for a place to sleep. They put out the bait. It was horrifying what they did. And they don't investigate their apparatus because it would expose their hands in pimpery and attack prostitution. The 80s was a time when Central America had heated up and Reagan was pushing for more dependence on fossil fuels. People like myself were saying, this is crazy. We have to look out for the earth. There's an ecology program that's at stake. And James Watt from Secretary of the Interior evoked the self-destruct mechanism in American Christian bully psychology about the Book of Revelations, something Europe has always had the taste to abstain from. But it was identified by the Axis, unpardonably used as a launching pin for the checkered leapfrog concepts that we now have to take into consideration as a tawdry legacy resulting from people who already had a plan so couldn't be bothered with ecology, for whom the storm of climate change served to represent their God power. I don't like it. I'm surprised so many people do. I'm surprised that people who are in the Christian church don't stand up for one another when it comes to a cowardly society who won't represent to children what it is necessary to know to avoid abortion, which includes conceptualizing human trafficking throughout the administrations of our social uh, framework. It's called a systemic problem. I'm not particularly happy with that word. It seems more like a systematic problem. It's push button. They identify the prospects and the perspectives and steer them according to their power to manipulate and control. This fact needs to be brought to light in the psyches of children so they know what to do and how to identify the problem. Instead, we leave them prey to these bully networks. Now, Russia has complained that they were left prey to a bully network too, and that they asked for help. They certainly, when you look at their rhetoric, when you look at how this developed, have made it look that way. The reason I say they have made it look that way is that there's a face behind the face in this one. There's a face behind the face because the leapfrog oligarchs, Trump and Waters and others in control of the catastrophe, don't care about anyone but themselves. And for them, the manipulation of the masses is something that they do as an egotistical stunt. I think people need to take cognizance of the way we're abandoning our obligations to analyze these situations. Immigrants arrive at our borders looking for hope, looking for a place to sit, and it's going to get worse. We need climate shelters, climate drop-ins. We need to look at the emergency and adapt and accommodate the situation to the level best of our power. It's time to stop crying of our loneliness in the family cars. What will I do without my automobile free time, cruising the streets and highways? Because this addiction to the automobile has proven to be so destructive that we're incapable of stopping, even pumping the brakes, much less slamming them on, which is reckless. In an emergency situation, we don't even know that we're in an emergency situation, dear Greta has said. We don't even know that we're not aware of the situation. We need to focus on this. Stop crying. The car is not man's best friend. Sit down and make a list of all the things you will miss, your children will miss, that you will care to see if you can, and make it into a poem or a song or a statement. This is more important to me than my stupid free time driving in what I took to be my best friend. Your car is not your best friend, not anymore. We need to start pumping the brakes and bringing the automobile industry to a safe stop to prevent the jeopardy of overpowering and overwhelming climate disaster. And it should be pointed out that the same people who refused to rationally address this situation were stomping on the gas pedal to make me an example they were calling the walrus. There has been no review of these tampering industries in our intelligentsia. It's all hooked up to administration of schools and administration of media in the name of national security. In the name of chastity, they play race pussy ball with rape outcome. It gets so ridiculous. And yet the Clintons egged it on. What gives that we should listen to them when they create a tempest in the Ukraine by lying and scuttling promises left and right that were made to keep the peace between long Cold War waging rivals? Martha Gellhorn told me in a private letter, America is this large island populated by self-absorbed dummies. Nothing good will come from all of that ignorance. I don't think we should settle for such a characterization. She was a very dear friend of Eleanor Roosevelt. She left and refused to come home. It's a shame. She found someone to write to in me once. I urge you to think clearly about the urgency of our situation and look for our friends and think about what they have to say. That's all I can tell you. There's nothing more that I can contribute.